Hi there, and welcome to Clarkenomics. In this video, we're going to talk about a very worthwhile topic to know things about, and that is credit cards. So, to get started, let's talk first about the difference between a debit card and a credit card. In previous videos, I've talked about debit cards, but a debit card, even though it looks pretty close to a credit card, is a card that's kind of like a digital check. It takes money that you have out of your checking account. That's how a debit card works. A credit card, even though it looks like a debit card, is not using money that you already have to buy things. In fact, when you're using a credit card, you are borrowing money to buy the thing that you're buying, and then you have to pay that money back. So you're creating kind of a short term loan every time you use a credit card. Now, both of these things are issued by banks. Some of these companies like American Express and Discover, they do issue their own credit cards. For the most part, when you see Visa and MasterCard, these are the companies responsible for the technology behind the card. And usually it's a bank, whether it's Bank of America or Chase or any of those other big banks you can mention, or a local bank like Wisvis here in Delaware. Those are the banks that issue credit cards. So when you use a credit card, you're borrowing money from that bank, and they may or may not be charging you interest, and we'll get to that down the line. Now, when you borrow money using a credit card, this is what we call unsecured debt. The opposite of unsecured debt is secured debt. Secured debt means there is collateral. So, for instance, if you have an auto loan, that is a secured debt. And if you don't pay back what you owe, they will repossess your car. Or a mortgage, which is a loan for a house, is secured debt. If you don't pay your mortgage, they will foreclose on your house and you will lose your house. Unlike those forms of secured debt, credit card purchases are generally unsecured, meaning you don't have to put up any collateral, anything that they can take back from you, right? In an auto loan, the collateral is your car. In a mortgage, the collateral is your house. Generally speaking, there is no collateral required, and so there's nothing for the bank to repossess if you don't pay back your credit card. Don't take that as, oh, I don't have to pay back my credit card. There are severe consequences that can ruin your life if you are not paying back your credit card. So again, we'll go through some rules of borrowing, but the rule is never borrow what you can't pay. That's the general rule. So with a credit card, your account is what we call a revolving account. So in previous videos, I've talked about things like bonds and loans, where there is a term, there is a maturity date, and the loan period comes to an end. Credit cards work a little bit differently. There is no beginning and end to a credit card account. It's revolving, meaning you buy stuff with a credit card. You're borrowing money, you pay it off. You buy more stuff, you pay it off. It's a revolving door. And you'll see an expiration date on a credit card. It's a 4-digit number that's usually on the front, sometimes on the back. That's not the end of your credit card. That's just when they're going to mail you a new card when this card expires. So there are continual due dates, and we'll get into the schedule of how that typically works. So, I mean, credit card, they look pretty simple. You have the name of the bank. All credit card numbers are 16 digits. They're grouped into groups of four. You'll also have, again, an expiration date, and the name of the card holder will be right down there. On the back, there's often something called a security code, which is now a 3-digit number, essentially. So if you're trying to use a credit card, they usually ask for 4 pieces of information. They'll ask for the credit card number, the expiration date, the cardholder's name, and the security code. And this little thing right here, this is a chip. Oftentimes we use chips to pay for things now, instead of the magnetic strip on the back and swiping. So interest rates for credit cards. Again, when you use a credit card, you're borrowing money, and you will most likely have to pay interest on that, although we'll talk about how to avoid that later. Um, what determines the interest rate that you pay when you use your credit card? Well, we're going to talk about this in a later video, but this is based on something called the federal funds rate. Indirectly, but still. So we'll talk about the Federal Reserve, we'll talk about monetary policy and interest rates, but the interest rates for credit cards, short-term debt, are indirectly based on a very important interest rate called the federal funds rate. Generally, and that's for everybody. There's also something called the US prime rate, which comes in there as well, but I'm not going to get into that one. The other factor that determines what interest rate you will pay potentially for credit is your credit worthiness. This is commonly expressed as a credit score, which is a 3-digit number, which basically tells a bank how likely are you to pay back the money that you are borrowing. So if you have a low credit score, a smaller number, the bank thinks you're not very likely to pay back the money, so they're going to charge you a higher rate of interest to make up for that risk. If the bank thinks you're a pretty safe borrower, you're very likely to pay it back, you're going to pay lower interest rates because you do not present a risk to banks. So make sure that you have good credit because it's going to give you access to better credit cards with better interest rates. And again, if you're the borrower of money, a better interest rate is a lower interest rate. So we're going to go through some steps here of how you might use a credit card in your day-to-day life and how to avoid paying interest. So we're going to go through this in a series of steps. Step one, the purchase. Let's imagine that on March 17th, I bought a mountain bike, like the one pictured there, very fancy, full suspension. And we're going to imagine that this mountain bike costs $396.22, which is unrealistically low for the mountain bike pictured, but go with it. So how can I buy that? Well, again, I can use the physical credit card itself. I can swipe the credit card. If it's a chip reader, I can insert the chip. If I want to add that credit account to a phone like Apple Pay or Google Pay, I can do that. That way I don't have to carry around the physical card, and it's in some ways more secure. You can also link that with like a smartwatch, like an Apple Watch, or you can pay online by entering the card information itself. So there are a lot of ways to use credit cards and credit these days. Of course, the merchants and the banks and all of these parties want to make it as easy for you to buy stuff as possible so that you buy more stuff. So there's lots of options. It's a little too easy sometimes because you don't have to necessarily stop and think about what you should be buying. You can only just realize what you can buy. So again, be very careful because they're going to make it easy for you to get into trouble. So if I buy this $396.22 mountain bike, what I'm going to have on my credit card is now a $396.22 balance. Now, when we talked about checking accounts, balance was the amount of money that you have in your account. So we said balance was having a high balance was a good thing in your checking account, right? It means you have a lot of money. For a credit card, it's a little bit different. On a credit card, balance is not what you have, it's what you owe. So if I have a $396.22 balance on my credit card account, that means that I owe $396.22. Now, how will I know how much I owe on my credit card? In other words, how will I know my balance? Well, it's easier than ever these days. You can go online and sign into your bank's website. Many of these banks have apps where you can view not only your balance, how much you owe, but you can view every individual purchase, right? You can see what you're buying. And this is important for tracking your habits and trends, and you can categorize different spending to see like where are you spending too much money, where can you afford to spend more money, things like that. And also importantly, being shown everything that you buy will make it obvious when transactions appear that you did not buy. In other words, if your identity gets stolen and someone is buying stuff with your credit card, you'll be able to go online and look and say, oh, I didn't buy that. I should tell the bank. So there's a lot of great tools out there for you guys to use these days. All right, so that's step one, the fun part, the purchase, when you get the nice thing like a bike. Step two is called the closing date. So this happens once every month. For instance, with that March purchase of the mountain bike that I did, let's say April 4th is my next closing date. On the closing date, the bank is going to look at my balance. They're going to send me a statement. Now, by default, I think this comes through the mail, like you'll get an envelope with this statement in it. But what I recommend doing is just going paperless, right? Save some paper and just get online statements. You can view everything, download PDFs. It's all there. And a statement will show you a few things. One, it'll show you what your balance is within the last month, that period. It'll show you the minimum amount that you have to pay to keep your credit account in what we call good standing. So there's that. And then it'll give you a due date. So this is a statement that I pulled off the internet over here. New balance total, current payment, that's the minimum payment, right? Oh, sorry. Down here, minimum payment due, and then payment due date. And they're going to give you some warnings about, what will happen if you don't pay on time. And they'll also tell you, because they're required to by the government, if you only make the minimum payment, here's how long it'll take to pay off this balance. And once interest is factored in, here's how much you will end up paying, right? So if you took 19 months to pay off this $396 bike, you will end up paying $459 for the bike. So knowing that's very expensive because you might look at the sticker on the bike at the store and say, oh, this is how much it costs. But if you take too long to pay it off, this $459 becomes the true cost of the bike. So you have to be very careful when you're using a credit card. So that's the closing date. They're going to tell you what you owe, they're going to tell you how much they're looking for, and they're going to tell you what the due date is for that payment. And so here, my payment is due May 1st. And you'll notice it's about a month after the closing date. And that's how this typically works. So step 3, the due date, is typically about a month after the closing date, not a calendar month necessarily, so pay attention to what's on your statement. So if my next due date is May 1st, I've got 3 options by May 1st. Here's what I can do. 1, I can pay off the entire balance, right? All $396.22. I could pay off the whole thing. And paying off a credit card is pretty easy. You link your checking account to your credit account. So if you go online, you can say, here's my bank account, like my checking account information. And then you can use money from your checking account to pay off your credit card. It's that easy, right? So you don't have to send anything through the mail necessarily, although I think you still can, but it's much faster to just go online, link your checking account to the credit card account, and then pay it off through your checking account. Now, this is the most miraculous thing. If you pay off the entire balance by the due date or on the due date, you don't pay any interest at all. None. Your interest rate's basically 0% if you pay off the entire balance by the due date. I'll say it again. If you pay off the entire balance by the due date, you will not pay a single penny in interest. It's wonderful. This is one of the main advantages of credit cards. You buy now, you pay later, but if you pay off the entire balance, then you pay 0% interest. It's awesome. So that's the first option. That is by far the best option. When you can, do that. Option 2, pay only the minimum payment. So they're only asking you for $25 out of $396.22 by May 1st. You have the option to pay just the minimum payment. But if you do that, then you're going to get charged interest on how much you have left. So the remaining $371.22 that's left over, you will pay interest on that. And this is what we call carrying a balance. You're carrying the balance from one month into the next month. And when you do that, that's when the interest begins. And interest in this case compounds daily, if you remember my video about compounding. And compounding in this case is a bad thing for you because you are not the lender of money, you are the borrower of money. So if you wait longer to pay it off, that's how this $396 turns into $459 because that interest you owe is compounding. So that's the second option. Option 3, don't pay anything. In other words, May 1st comes and goes and you just ignore the credit card statement. Not a good idea. So you'll be charged interest on the entire $396.22, so that's bad. You'll also be, as it says right here in this sample statement, be required to pay a late fee of up to $39 for that as well. And what's going to happen is they're going to jack up your, what we call APR, but basically your interest rate here, to a higher penalty rate because now that you have not paid the minimum payment, like the bare minimum that you have to pay, the bank's going to think of you as a riskier borrower. So they're going to charge you more interest to make up for that. And so your APR, which is again related to your interest rate, will go up about 10% here. So up to 29.99%, very high interest rate. That's if you don't even pay the minimum payment by the due date. So make sure whenever you possibly can, you at least pay the minimum payment. Ideally, what you'd want to do by the due date is pay off the entire balance that you owe. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about APR in the terms of costs. APR is basically annualizing the interest rate. There's a daily interest rate that credit cards have. That's not super useful. So the APR takes the interest rate and puts it over an entire year essentially. So I checked, and for my credit card, my APR is 20.99% essentially. So that is again related to the interest rate. Again, the penalty APR is higher. So again, if you can pay at least the minimum payment, make sure you're doing that. And a lot of banks make it pretty easy for you. They set up auto pay. So like on the due date, you can set up auto pay to pay at least the minimum payment on the due date. So like you can't forget to pay the minimum payment. So it's easier than ever to make sure you're not getting hit with this. So make sure you're doing the right thing. Now the APR, which I'm not going to go crazy into, but just on a basic level, combines the interest rate with any other fees because sometimes loans, credit cards have fees. Like for instance, some credit cards have an annual fee. Just to keep that credit card, you might have to pay money to the bank every year. A lot of credit cards, this used to be more commonplace than it is now. Like the Discover card kind of killed annual fees back in the 80s. But some of the high-end cards, like if you've ever heard of the Black Card or any of those other super fancy cards, they have an annual fee just to keep the account going. So the APR combines any of these fees with the interest rate to give you a whole picture of how much you're going to owe as a percentage. So the interest rate is good, but if banks are sneaking all these fees in here, the interest rate doesn't give you the whole picture. APR, annual percentage rate, will always give you the whole picture because it factors in all of the costs associated. So don't look at the interest rate, look at the APR. Very important. All right. There's a few reasons why people use credit cards. A lot of them give you rewards these days. So, for instance, some cards offer a welcome bonus. For instance, I think with this Bank of America card here, if you spend a certain amount of money in the first few months of owning it, let's say you spend $300 with this card in the first few months, or maybe it's a higher number, I can't remember, they're going to give you a little reward. Sometimes it's not so little. It can be like $150, sometimes more, in cashback rewards. So, for signing up for credit cards, they try to offer you these incentives to sign up for their credit cards. Cashback or statement credits. So you'll probably see commercials for cashback, 1%, 2%, categories, all this stuff. The rules are always shifting here. But like, let's say you get 3% cash back on your credit card. What that means is if you spend $100, you're going to get a $3 reward back. So you can use these for statement credits. So when you get your statement, let's say you owed $100, you will get that little reward and you can cash in that reward and now you'll only owe $97, right? If it's a 3% cashback reward. Again, the rules for this vary from bank to bank, so be sure to read everything very carefully. Other banks offer these things called points or miles. Again, every bank has their own terminology for this. Read the rules very carefully. But there are some very good things you can take advantage of here. I get pretty good rewards every month, and because I pay off the entire balance every month on my credit card, I never actually pay any interest. And I do get these cashback rewards, so it's a pretty good situation. Other times, there's just other privileges the card holders get. Citibank often advertises that you get like special access to concert tickets and other things like that if you hold their card. So, read carefully and see what's out there. And other banks, actually almost all banks these days, are showing your credit score. Your credit score used to be something you had to like pay for back in the day if you wanted to see your credit score all the time. But a lot of banks are throwing that in as a perk now. You can see your credit score every month just by holding the card. So if you're a Citibank member, Bank of America member, they'll show you your credit score, which can be very useful. Because again, if someone steals your identity, it can do damage to your credit. And if you're monitoring your credit score, you can make sure that no one's doing anything sketchy. And that leads me to the third one, fraud protection. Um, you might like so let's say somebody gets your credit card information and uses your credit card. If it's a credit card, you might not be responsible for those fraudulent purchases. A lot of banks offer protection, so they're not going to hold you accountable for buying something that you didn't buy. Debit cards rarely offer that protection. So, in an age where identity theft is unfortunately pretty commonplace, a credit card can offer this very good perk in the form of fraud protection. So, if you think your card has been used fraudulently, you can file a report with the bank and they'll see to it, hopefully, that you're not going to be owing money for something you didn't buy. So there's all kinds of good stuff out there with credit cards, including 0%. So this is what's called sometimes a 0% introductory APR, sometimes commonly referred to as a same as cash deal. And what this means is you can carry a balance with no interest for a certain amount of time, right? So you can still have a balance from month to month to month, but you still won't pay any interest. Now, this doesn't last forever. It only lasts for what's called a promotional period. And these types of deals are only before everyone's thinking like, oh, let me just get an 0% APR card. These kinds of deals are only available to people with good credit, right? The bank's not going to give you 0% interest if you are a credit risk to them. So make sure you keep your credit score high so that you can get these good deals, which are going to save you money. So here's how this might work. Let's say I go to a store like Best Buy or something like that, and I buy a $2,000 refrigerator, and it comes with a 12-month 0% APR. Whether my credit card gives me that, or whether it's a deal for like a Best Buy card that Best Buy offers through a bank. There's all kinds of ways that this happens, but let's just say the credit card's offering 12 months, 0% APR. What that means is if I pay off the entire $2,000 in 12 months, I will owe zero interest on that $2,000 for that refrigerator. So it's a great way to make a big purchase that you might not have the money for today, but if you know you're gonna have the money within that 12 months, then you're not gonna pay any interest. You're getting a free loan basically. It's awesome. So there's that. If I don't pay off the entire $2,000 in 12 months, I am going to pay interest on the remaining balance after 12 months. So the deal kind of goes away a little bit if you don't pay off the entire amount you owe within the period that they're giving you. However, there's another catch here. If you miss any monthly payments, because there's still minimum payments that you have to make, and if you miss any of them, they will cancel the offer and you'll owe interest not just on whatever you still owe, but you'll owe interest on the entire purchase sometimes. So again, the rules vary from place to place, but this can be a very good deal if you use it right, right? So if you pay off the entire amount you owe within the period, you will not pay a single penny in interest. Now, here's how this works. It's really easy to figure out. Let's say, again, $2,000 refrigerator, 12-month period. I don't want to pay any interest. How much do I need to pay off every month? I'll need to pay at least $167 each month. All you have to do is divide 2,000 by 12. It's about 167. So if I pay that every month and I make a plan to put that money aside for my refrigerator payment, I will pay off the entire thing within 12 months and not have to pay any interest, and it's great. But be careful. When you get your statements for this credit card, the minimum payment is not likely going to be $167 each month. The minimum payment's probably only going to be like 50 bucks because that's the minimum payment. So if you were to pay off 50 bucks a month for 12 months, you will have only paid off $600 at the end of 12 months. That's 50 times 12, $600, which means you're going to now owe interest at the end of that 12 months on the remaining $1,400 of balance that you have. So again, don't just look at the minimum payment. You have to divvy that up into equal, it doesn't have to be equal, but you have to pay at least the minimum and plan to pay off the entire $2,000 in that 12 months. So some credit cards do 12 months. I've had a credit card that gives me 21 months of 0% interest. There are some very good deals out there to get. But again, those are only available to people with good credit. All right, so how do you get a credit card? Well, it's, pretty easy. In some cases, a little bit too easy. You can get approved for a credit card online in like about 30 seconds, sometimes a minute. Again, you have to fill out information about yourself, but it happens pretty quickly. And some credit card companies, they're all going to mail you a credit card, but some companies will even give you your credit card information instantly, electronically, so you can start buying stuff even before you get the physical card. They make it pretty easy to do some spending, so you got to be real careful because using credit cards responsibly is a great way to build up your credit score, to increase your credit score, and we'll talk about that in another video. But if you use them irresponsibly, you can ruin your entire life. Getting out of credit card debt is very difficult. It can really drag down every other aspect of your life. So you have to be responsible with a credit card. You apply to get a credit card. You can be denied a credit card if your credit's not good enough. Again, most people go online and they fill out a form online and click apply, and they can get approved in less than a minute. Even applying for a credit card will affect your credit score. So be very careful about how many you apply for in a short period of time. There's a lot of rules out there, but there's a great site that I like to use personally called nerdwallet.com. They do get paid by banks for promoting different credit cards, but generally speaking, they're a great resource to learn about different credit cards, what the terms are, and which one is right for you, if any. So make sure you're always reading the rates and fees document. It's what some people call fine print, but it is tremendously important information. If you don't understand anything, go do more research. Don't sign up for things like this that you don't understand, because again, you can get yourself into a huge amount of trouble. Learn, learn, learn before you do. So, staying out of trouble, if you want the simple rule, again, it's only ever purchase something if you have the income to pay for it. If you do that, you'll always be able to pay off your credit card and you won't find yourself in a bad situation, right? So only purchase something if you have the income to pay for it. Just because you want it is not a good reason to buy it. Make sure you can. Credit cards are an excellent resource to get the things that you want, maybe even with some perks, but you have to be smart and you have to be careful. Thanks for watching.